Senate Democrats introduced a new agenda this week called Thrive. Like the Green New Deal, it tackles similar climate change-related issues, things like creating green jobs and environmental racism. But unlike the Green New Deal, the Thrive agenda also incorporates the economic hit from the coronavirus pandemic. To talk more about that and some of the other things that are happening across the country right now, we have Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson-Lee joining us from Houston. Congresswoman, good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about Thrive and what kind of support it's getting on Capitol Hill, and for a lot of people who are perhaps not understanding how it's different from the Green New Deal, if you could explain that for us as well.
Well, Thrive is healing. Thrive is reinvestment and it's reformation, and it's broadly based around realizing that America is aging. Frankly, our Earth is aging. And it speaks to not only the issues of climate and the recognition of climate change, but we talk about new jobs in many different ways. For example, manufacturing, clean technology manufacturing. It may not be relevant to energy or relevant to a green climate, but it is creating the kind of manufacturing jobs that protects the earth and provides the right kind of investment. It recognizes that the hardest hit populations are Black and Brown indigenous populations as it relates to unemployment, the lack of jobs, and also COVID-19. And in particular, it addresses squarely the impact that has been felt in those communities in terms of loss of jobs, lack of access to healthcare. So it speaks to making sure that we have the kind of broad-based healthcare that is accessible to all people.
But it is so comprehensive. I put this question to Representative Deb Haaland on Thursday, and I want to ask your take as well. When talking about the coronavirus and the economic impacts of the pandemic, what does sweeping agenda items matter to people who are suffering right now when Congress can't even agree on a follow-up COVID relief package?
Well, I think I should clarify that Republicans can't agree. Democrats in the House passed, with a lot of input from many different people, passed the HEROES Act, $3 trillion that would have comforted and provided for people across the country, no matter whether they were Democrats or Republicans or independents, whether they were in red states or blue states, whether they were north or south or east or west. Frankly, right now, we're in the middle of negotiations. We're on the way back to Washington. We expect that the Republicans, unfortunately, I'd call them stubborn, would offer a new submission, if you will, with a recognition that the Democrats could not vote for a legislation that would cut public schools, that did not meet the needs of people who are unemployed, lacking a real commitment to the cash disbursement, poison pills, as I said, about public school education, not recognizing how much our cities and counties are hurting because of lost revenue, refusing to provide those dollars. We expect to see a new offer, and I'm committed to getting a deal. I know the leadership is committed to getting a deal, not for ourselves, obviously, but because we see people are in pain here in our communities. And as you well know, I'm living in the midst of so many people being evicted, as my other colleagues are. We just gave a grant to someone who was going to be evicted yesterday. We were able to stop it. His 4 children, single parent, and a granddaughter. So we know the pain that Americans are feeling. We're going to fight for it. The Thrive Act is where we need to be in our future days. We need to be there, as Dr. Fauci said, when we come out on the other side of COVID-19 in the later part of 2021. We are realistically adhering to the science. But Thrive is to get this nation thriving and let it thrive for all people, and creating jobs, cleaning up our environment, recognizing climate change, building houses, restoring the infrastructure. I think it's a common sense initiative, but more importantly, it's forward thinking. And what I like about it is it's cross-generational. Young people are excited about the Thrive Act, but at the same time, people who care for children, who are middle-aged, and it goes across economic levels, from those who are impoverished to middle class and working Americans. The Thrive Act is a new investment in this nation.
I'd also like to talk to you about, I know you're very interested in the welfare of children, and many kids across the country are heading back to school right now. How's that going so far in Texas? And what are you hearing from your peers about how the government is or isn't doing a sufficient job in helping?
Well, it's unfortunate that President Trump, who is not an educator, and the Secretary of Education were focusing more on the election in November and how good you could look in a campaign, as opposed to children, teachers, parents, science. Again, I'll refer to that, medical doctors and superintendents and state education systems. It's very difficult, both in terms of higher ed. We have evidenced what has happened with colleges that have rushed too quickly. They have started and stopped. They have had to quarantine students. They've seen big parties on campuses and off campus. As it relates to K through 12, I've got some hardworking superintendents. You know, I represent the seventh largest school district in the nation, Houston ISD. They recognized that they had to start online with respect to K through 12. This was the first week, and I will tell you, it was a lot of hard work, but as any new, unfamiliar territory, there were some bumps in the road. But as those bumps were in the road, they were ready and prepared for them. So, in addition to online, we created satellite centers for children that could not get connected, at risk children, and provided teachers on site, socially spaced, socially distanced, in a very safe area to help those children. We're still needing the kind of technology in our laptops. Isn't it something that we are facing in America, a time that we all needed to be online, and some school children, because of poverty, did not have laptops. Some were not connected. Rural communities do not have broadband, and that's one of the issues of the Thrive Act. So people worked in the best way they can. But one thing we know, they did the right thing. And why? They did the right thing because, as I said, 70,000 children have been found to be infected in the last 2 weeks of COVID-19 children. And we've also determined that they are infectious and they can be asymptomatic as well and spread it as well as any adult. So we know that that is a possibility. So we have handled it that way. And today, Lana, we announced a commitment to provide a social structure to be able to test any child with COVID-19 or test children in the public school arena that is agreed to by the superintendent, the parent, the child, and teachers, and able to take these people and test them on site, teachers, maintenance workers, bus drivers, and others as necessary. And that, I believe, is in support of the structure that has been spoken to by those in the CDC who are not muzzled. They believe that if you're going back to school, whether it's higher education or it's secondary and elementary, that you need to be tested. We're doing that here in Houston, Texas. We hope to set up a structure for all of our school districts, and we hope to realize a system that makes the children safe. And I'd say to the president, you can't push political agendas on children who are trying to learn, and you can't force children into school buildings if it is not safe.
Congresswoman, there are calls across the country for police reform and an end to systemic racism. You're backing a bill called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020. Where does that currently stand on Capitol Hill, and do you have optimism that this can be passed before the election?
Well, you know, Lana, I was baffled. Just a few weeks ago, we had General Barr in front of the House Judiciary Committee, and I asked him the question of whether or not he understood systemic racism and institutional racism. I was baffled because the highest ranking law officer in the nation could not admit to this idea or this reality. For that reason, I think it is important that we have self-help. In the United States Congress, Republicans and Democrats voted for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to come out of the House of Representatives, reflecting the tragic death of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Mr. Brooks in Atlanta, Walter Scott, Tamir Rice. Many names can be listed, many families mourning, many good police officers, many good committed people who want to work together. I think the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act brings that kind of opportunity to America through a federal law. My view is that the United States Senate, again, offered a very thin example of police reform. We could not substitute that for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which ends racial profiling, talks about the idea of excessive force, when to use it, de-escalation, duty to intervene, ending the chokeholds, ending the imbalance between the victim and the perpetrator, meaning the individual officer that may have been engaged in a shooting or some death. It balances it in the courtroom. So here's where we are. We're negotiating. There are members who are negotiating. We are encouraging the negotiations. We're being briefed on those. We hope that Senator Scott, who's been a leader on these issues for the Senate, he has experienced racial profiling, as he indicated, and other members of the Senate, Democrats and Republicans. I would hope that they would present a strong bill that we could then go to conference and come out with the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act and listen to these very, very strongly committed nonviolent protesters who have simply asked for justice. I want them to know that they're being heard.
A lot of people waiting for that progress.
And we want to act on that. Thank you.
Yes. Before I let you go, Congresswoman, I want to talk to you about Senator Kamala Harris. When she was announced as the VP nominee, you said Kamala has taken us to the mountaintop. Regardless of party, hers is a historic nomination. As a woman who has broken barriers herself, I want to give you an opportunity to tell us what you think it would mean to see her in office.
Well, thank you so very much. First of all, I think where I am today is relevant. I'm at Wheatley High School, which is where Barbara Jordan graduated from high school. Texas Southern University was where Barbara Jordan participated in the debate team, and she mentored me. And I wonder what would have happened to her in her journey. And I wonder what she would have thought about the Honorable Kamala Harris. And so I want to repeat the fact that we have been taken to the mountaintop. But more importantly, I think, as we have seen her ascend to the most powerful next door office in the land, the Vice President of the United States, chosen by Joe Biden, the next President of the United States, let me say that it has opened a new, refreshing wellspring of opportunities for little girls and little boys of color. It has given us a sense that the doors that have been closed now are kicked wide open. That mountaintop is not a selfish point of destination. It's a place where many of us can ascend to. And it lays the groundwork, I think, for a new embracing America that welcomes everyone to be able to achieve their highest capacity of opportunity. It's an opportunity gesture. And as our little boys and girls go back to school, you can be assured that all of them know the name of Kamala Harris. And it is another opportunity for them to say, there's nothing that can keep me from achieving all that I can achieve. From government perspective, I just want to say, it says that America has arrived. We had, and we were delighted to elect President Barack Hussein Obama. We now have a woman of color, an African-American woman, a woman of South Asian descent, to be able to take the second highest office and to embrace us, to say that we too are part of this great nation.
All right. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.